You weren't there, but it was like me and James and Lara Flynn Boyle and Ray and Richard Beamer. I think that was the group that was there that day for the test, and it was my first test ever for any television show, and that was it. It was pretty much the easiest job I ever got. Bear with me. Gary Hershberger, please.
Well, gosh, is this on? Yeah. I think I got off easy. You guys had to audition. I mean, I had to audition, but I didn't have to read, which is the first time I ever had to do anything like that. So I went in pretty clueless, and I walked in, and Joanna was there, and David was there, and I'm not sure if Mark was there or not, but David was there, I remember, and he just, I was staying pretty quiet. And he just kept talking about this character, Snake. And I hadn't really played a character like this, really ever. This guy was brooding, and his kind of, oops. Sorry. This guy was the brooding bulk for you. Like, I was your backup. So I had never played a part like this before, but Dave just kept talking, and I just kept being quiet. And the more he kept talking about the character, I was just drilling him with my eyes, and I just put on my little angry eyes, and I just kept going. Okay, that's what you want. That's what I'm gonna get. Okay, here you go. Here you go. We spent 5 minutes talking, and that was it. He cast me on that meeting. Didn't have to read a thing, thankfully. Probably would have choked it. But that was my experience. It was delightful. On the set, he couldn't have been nicer. He just had this way about. Directing actors. I don't know about if you guys felt like that. He's just very, very soft-spoken. We used to wear the same thing on the set every day. Khaki pants, white button-down shirt, and a blue blazer. And he just talked like Jimmy Stewart. So, and you just listen to him, you'd just be captivated with, remember the scene in the beginning when he says, there's a scene when me and Dana are in jail, and we end up barking. Listen. It's James Marshall, right? So
I remember Lara Flynn Boyle after that scene. She was like outside of where we were doing it. She walked in and she was just like,
we'd show up on the set. We just thought, gosh, what's going to happen today? It was always like, well, that's the script, but let's do this. Like, okay. And we would. I remember he came in and goes, Gary, you know when you go to the zoo, and you hear the monkeys. You hear the monkeys, and one of them starts to go, and the other guy, and they're just going like, and I kind of said, no. I don't know that, because, you'll get it. So one guy barks, and the other, you want me to bark. That's going to look good. And I'm completely thinking, this is going to just go, it's going to look ridiculous with that. But the other way we shot it was actually okay. Anyway, that's my story.
Well, I had just a little bit of different background with David. I met David when he was a student at AFI, and he was doing this little film, and my roommate was working as an assistant to the set decorator there, Jack Fisk. And Jack was married to David's wife's sister at the time. And my roommate came home and she said, they're looking for an actress to be in this student film. I said, okay, because in those days, I used to do a lot of student films. I did anything anybody asked me to do, quite frankly. And so she invited the director over for dinner. And so David Lynch and his wife Peggy came to dinner, and he brought me the script of Eraserhead. And we had dinner, and he brought me a sack of wheat seed. As some people bring flowers, and some people bring a bottle of wine. David, because we lived in Topanga, brought me a sack of wheat seed. And interesting. But so the script was of Eraserhead, and it was so big. And I read it, I did not understand a thing about it. But I did go on to play Mary X, and established a very long relationship with David, because as you probably heard, it took about 6 years to do Eraserhead. And and by the time it was released, he went on to do Elephant Man, because Mel Brooks saw Eraserhead and hired him to do Elephant Man, and David's career took off. So cut to when he decided to get ready to do Twin Peaks. Jack Nance was already cast in it, who was Henry in Eraserhead. He played Pete Martell. Pete Martell. He's dead, wrapped in glass. And he asked me if would I like to be in the series. And he didn't really ask me. He just told Jack to tell me. That kind of thing. And the only thing, I went in to meet David and Mark before we started shooting, and they asked me if there's anything that I wanted to say about my character, Betty Briggs. I played Betty Briggs, Major Briggs' wife, Bobby's mom. And I said the only thing I can think of is that his dad is military, his mom is Catholic, and Bobby is screwed. So that was my audition for Betty Briggs.
And yeah,
I'm just
Jill,
here
tell
by
us.
mistake.
Well, just quickly, my background is theater, doing musicals and singing and dancing, and we moved out from New York, and I wanted to find out what television and film was like. So I took a job, or was given a job. I was hired as a PA, a production assistant for Twin Peaks, for the pilot, and then subsequently for the, and it's a hellish job, but you really learn, a lot of it. Bob and Mark and I had all gone to college together, so I knew them, and they sort of knew what I did, and subsequently I got cast as Trudy, who is the Great Northern waitress with a really high beehive, and I got to learn Icelandic and sing Home on the Range in Icelandic, and all kinds of weird things that they knew about me. So it was great to have both sides of seeing how the production side worked, as well as acting a bit, singing a bit, and ultimately, I'm sure I just married well.
So, Bob, you wrote a lot of episodes of the show, and I'm curious to know, your first one was one of the episodes that we saw tonight, the fourth episode after the pilot, right? Tell us a little bit about having to pick up the voice that Mark and David set for all of these characters. How did that relationship work? Were you working together, or were you sort of on assignment to do particular episodes?
Well, it's curious that Mark was here last week, yeah? So, a couple weeks ago. But the structure of Twin Peaks is really pretty simple, very much like a soap opera, right? I mean, we would pick out the things that had to happen in an episode, and then there would be probably four major things that would have to happen in an episode, and then each of those got a scene 4 times, right? It really as simple as that. And we would beat that out pretty quickly, and Mark usually would do all of that. Mark and Harley and I would work all through that. And then you'd go away and write it. And you'd come back in 2 weeks, and then we'd go through it again, and you'd go back and work another week and come back, and then Mark would make another pass through it before we shot it, right? So it was really pretty simple in that sense, that the season was completely planned out, the 7 and then the next 13 or wherever it was. That was all figured out, but it was pretty much left open to us how you wanted to get to those different places, right? You could change things around, you could maneuver things, but ultimately we all knew where we were going for each one of them, and I think it's episode 4 that I had. It just turned out that there were lots of stuff that got resolved, lots of stuff that turned in that episode. So people get really geeky about that. It's that's just luck, that was the first episode I'd ever written for television. So that was. But the poem that Hawk says, right? That's in 4, right? I thought I was being funny, and it was kind of cool. But I thought, well, this would be kind of a goofy poem he had. And I've spent the rest of my life people coming up and saying, you know, we used that poem at our wedding. and the healing ginger of the healing rhizome of the ginger plant, that's from the back of a Briggs shampoo bottle. We go out and all the you know, the sayings of Buddha or whatever we were using. We had like an 8th grader's introduction to the Dalai Lama. If you're looking for that, oh, that's a good one. But you know, that's just because I sucked. But Mark and Harley are really good at it.
One of my favorite scenes in the entire series is when Major Briggs smacks the cigarette out of Bobby's mouth. I'm curious to know what it was like to work with Don Davis, and if there's anything about that particular day of shooting that you have to share.
Well, Don, working with Don was always a highlight for me. He after day in and day out with this one, Don was a welcome surprise. No, he's just like, you know, he was like a pro to me. Like when I worked with him, I was always like, okay, well, that's what I should try to be someday. I mean, he was just so good. He always made me better. I felt like the scenes I had with him were always like some of the better scenes that I did acting wise. And you know, that particular scene was awesome. When I read it, I was just like, I thought, oh my God, it's the greatest scene. And then, you know, it came out pretty darn good. It came out pretty much like it was written.
Yeah, everybody talks to me about the cigarette and the meatloaf.
I mean, I wish I had to take credit for it. I didn't do anything. I just was like basically just the conduit. I mean, the scene was written really as it came about. It was really well written.
Yeah.
It was great.
Don was an amazing guy. He was an artist. He was a wood carver. He taught acting.
He's an amazing artist.
Oh.
I have a few of his pieces. He did like some amazing
Yeah, I do
pointillism.
too. I have one of the etchings that he did, and he was such a gentle soul and just so wise. We just loved him so much.
Yeah, there was the scene in the diner between he and I when he tells me about the dream, and he knows at the end of the dream that I'm going to be okay. It's the scene basically where that I think Mark Frost wrote that scene. I'm not sure, but I remember during the scene, David directed that episode, and at the end of the scene, he wanted me to cry, and it wasn't really happening when it got to my side of the coverage, and so he took Dawn aside when they were covering me for the scene. They took Dawn aside, and he talked to Dawn, and I was sitting there going, what's going on here? Dawn came back, and he did like the whole speech, but during the speech, he started crying, like off camera. He just like started crying, and I like couldn't help but get emotional. It was unbelievable. That's my Don Davis. He's amazing.
Bob, I'm curious, because after the first few episodes, there is a very lengthy stretch of this series that does not take place at the high school. And I'm curious, because so many of these characters are still in school, why you guys moved away from that as a place to set the show.
You know, I don't know that. You guys weren't in high school that much, even at the first, right? I mean,
You might go in school
in the pilot a lot, yeah, and there was a principal makes a speech in the pilot, right? But no, I think it was because you guys looked a little older than high school. I don't mean it that way. You don't even say it like you look like you were in college, right? So, you know, so I think that's where it came from. And a lot of it had to do with locations. I think that's Van Nuys, right? That's where we shot that, Van Nuys High School. We probably couldn't get in there, right? So it becomes something else. We did a lot in the bathroom, right? There were a lot of smoking scenes in the bathroom. Yeah, the girls' bathroom. But I think also that the plot sort of took off. You know, after the first 7, then we were a phenomenon, right? You know, that's about somewhere after the pilot and somewhere there, Dave's on the cover of Time, right? And then so everything got bigger, don't you think? It was,
after the first 7 aired.
Mm-hmm.
Because the pilot and then the 7 aired.
Yeah.
After that, it was a really different experience.
That's when they stopped giving us scripts.
Yeah.
They wouldn't let us know what was going to happen. Each of us got only our scene, and we couldn't come watch the other scenes. In the beginning, we used to just come and hang around and watch other people's work and other scenes, and then all of a sudden that was like,